Hey everyone, welcome. Today we're diving into a genuinely fascinating explainer on a mystery that has completely obsessed historians and paranormal investigators for decades. We're talking about the legendary village of Kuldhara. Get ready because we're going to look right past the shadows and unmask the real story where history, science, and some seriously spine-tingling folklore all collide. Right off the bat, we've got to address the big, chilling question that literally draws thousands of people to the Thar Desert every single year. Is Kuldhara actually haunted? I mean, for nearly 2 centuries, this place has sat completely empty, earning this massive reputation as India's most haunted village. It's so intense that even the Rajasthan Tourism Department forbids anyone from entering after sunset because of these claims of ghostly cries and eerie sounds. But, to find the real truth, we need to look at what happens when professionals actually go out there looking for ghosts. So picture this. It's 2013, it is 2 a.m., pitch black, right in the middle of the Thar Desert. Gaurav Tiwari, the founder of the Indian Paranormal Society, and his team are wrapping up an investigation in the dead of night. And as they walk back to their vehicles, they spot something that should be impossible. Right there, perfectly clear on the dusty bonnet of their car, are the handprints of a 4 to 5-year-old child. Now, there were no children around for miles, and remember, no one had lived in this village for 200 years. As they're looking around completely shocked, more strange prints start appearing, even showing up on a visiting journalist's car. Honestly, it sounds exactly like the opening scene of a horror movie, but this is actual, documented reality. To really wrap our heads around the massive scale of this historical mystery, we have to compare what Kuldhara looks like today with what it used to be. And the contrast is just staggering. Today, if you visit, you'll see over 400 abandoned houses, completely empty streets, dry wells, just barren, cursed ruins where nobody dares to stay the night. But 200 years ago, this wasn't just some sleepy village. It was this incredibly prosperous, bustling hub made up of 84 connected villages, founded by the Paliwal Brahmins way back in the 13th century. These folks were brilliant. Agriculturalists, bankers, traders, they were positioned right on the major trade route between Jaisalmer and Sindh, which actually made Kuldhara wealthier than the city of Jaisalmer itself. So how on earth does an entire wealthy civilization just turn to dust? Okay, let's dive right into this timeline and look at the famous local folklore that supposedly answers that exact question. Enter our main villain, Diwan Salim Singh. He was the prime minister of Jaisalmer in the early 1800s. According to the legend, this notoriously cruel ruler set his sights on the Kuldhara village chief's beautiful daughter. When they rejected his demands, he issued a terrifying ultimatum: hand her over or he would literally slaughter the entire village. So faced with a war they couldn't possibly win, the villagers made an unthinkable choice. The myth goes that on the night of July 29, 1825, around 80,000 people across all 84 villages just vanished. Overnight. They left behind their ancestral homes and supposedly cast a dark, permanent curse that no one would ever be able to settle there again. And what's really fascinating here is that this mythical curse is actually backed up by some genuinely bizarre modern claims. Paranormal investigators have recorded stuff that keeps the spooky suspense incredibly high. I'm talking about sudden, inexplicable temperature drops to a freezing -2 degrees Celsius, right in the middle of a baking hot desert. They've documented wild electromagnetic field, or EMF, spikes that seemingly react to their questions. At one point, when a team tried to review footage of a supposed shadow figure, their entire system just completely crashed. You add in reports of disembodied sounds of women crying and temple bells ringing out of nowhere, and yeah, it's pretty easy to see why this ghost story has survived for so long. But here in this explainer, we don't just stop at spooky stories, right? We did for the facts. We really have to ask ourselves the ultimate logical question here. Did 80,000 people really coordinate a massive, synchronized exodus and just disappear into thin air in a single night without any authorities noticing? It's time to shift our perspective. Peel back the layers of all this folklore and look at the hard, objective evidence. Let's unmask this mystery once and for all. Let's start by looking at the villain himself. The myth tells us that this massive overnight exodus was triggered by a rejected marriage proposal. But what does actual history say? Well, looking at official documents like the Jaisalmer Gazette and British colonial records, Diwan Salim Singh was very much a real person, and yes, he was absolutely a brutal tyrant. He ruled with an iron fist and taxed the people so mercilessly that he amassed a staggering 2 crore rupees. To put that into perspective, that was an astronomical fortune for the 1800s. However,
Historians have painstakingly combed through state documents, books, and royal decrees, and guess what? There's absolutely zero historical proof that the village chief's daughter ever existed. The whole romanticized kidnapping story, it looks like it's pure folklore.
So, if it wasn't a villainous kidnapping, what actually happened? Well, back in January 2017, a scientific journal published a study claiming that a massive earthquake destroyed Kuldhara, which prompted the terrified villagers to invent the overnight curse story as a cover. And, it seemed pretty plausible at first since the area is near active fault lines. But science relies on peer review, and just 1 year later, in 2018, geologists completely dismantled that theory. They pointed out there are simply zero records of a major earthquake happening around 1825. Plus, earthquakes don't just magically target one specific village while leaving all the surrounding ones totally untouched. But the absolute nail in the coffin for this theory, the interlocking architectural walls of Kuldhara are actually still standing perfectly intact today. A massive earthquake would have cracked them wide open. And this data right here brilliantly illustrates the real truth. These hard numbers completely shatter the myth of a magical overnight disappearance of 80,000 people. During its golden age between the 15th and 17th centuries, Kuldhara's population sat right around 10,588. But British records clearly show that by 1815, which is a full decade before the supposed overnight vanishing, the population had already dwindled down to just 800 people. And the migration just kept going. By 1890, there were actually 37 people still living there. So this wasn't some overnight magic trick or a sudden curse. It was a slow, agonizing decline. So what were the true causes of this exodus? It was actually a really devastating combination of environmental and economic disasters. First off, the Cake River, which was the absolute lifeblood of their agriculture, began to dry up, which severely depleted their groundwater. By 1815, almost all of their wells were bone dry. At the exact same time, Salim Singh completely refused to lower his relentless taxes, pushing the struggling villagers right to the brink of starvation. On top of that, due to a severe lack of local security, major trade routes ground to a halt, and bandits were constantly attacking the villages, even kidnapping women for ransom. It wasn't a supernatural curse at all. It was just a heartbreaking, unlivable situation that ultimately forced the Paliwal Brahmins into a voluntary exile, migrating out slowly to find better lives in places like Jodhpur, Uttarakhand, and Bihar. Now you might be wondering, okay, if there is a perfectly logical historical explanation for the abandonment, why do so many modern visitors swear up and down that they experience paranormal activity? Well, the answer lies in psychology, specifically confirmation bias. This is our brain's natural tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of what we already believe. Think about it. When tourists walk into a place that they have been explicitly told is India's most haunted village, their brains are already primed for terror. So every totally natural rustle of the wind blowing through an abandoned stone house gets instantly interpreted as a ghostly scream. And right alongside confirmation bias, we have another really fascinating psychological trick at play here called pareidolia. This is the human brain's desperate, hardwired need to find familiar patterns like a face or a human figure in random visual data. So when you're already terrified walking through dark desert ruins at dusk, a strangely shaped shadow cast by a dead bush easily becomes a headless ghost. It's kind of funny, experts have actually noted that when visitors go to Kuldhara without knowing anything about its haunted reputation beforehand, they don't experience anything unusual at all. The ghosts, as it turns out, are essentially brought in by the visitors themselves. So that brings us to a really crucial question. Who actually benefits from keeping this fake ghost story alive for so long? Well, history tells us that when the Paliwal Brahmins eventually fled, they couldn't exactly carry all their heavy wealth with them, so they left gold and silver buried right under their homes. For decades, local thieves intentionally stoked the fires of the curse to scare people away so they could loot the village at night. This actually came to a head during a major incident in 1998, when locals caught foreign treasure hunters out there literally using metal detectors to dig up antique gold and silver coins from the ruins. After that, the government finally stepped in and built a security wall. So the spooky ghost story, it was really just the perfect cover for a very human heist. Now, I know exactly what you're thinking. You're saying, wait a minute, what about those creepy child handprints on the car at 2 a.m. that you mentioned earlier? Well, here's the reality check. That specific paranormal claim is based entirely on a single, unverified video that has never been independently authenticated. Furthermore, Just 4 kilometers away from Kuldhara is a fully inhabited, normal village. Kids play in the area all the time, and nomadic shepherds frequently walk their livestock right through the ruins, day and night. Those dusty handprints were almost certainly just left by some local kids wandering by earlier in the day, completely unnoticed until the investigators got spooked in the dark. So let's pivot for a second, because I want to show you what Kuldhara's true legacy really is. Instead of remembering this place for a bunch of fabricated ghosts, we should frankly be in absolute awe of the scientific genius of the Paliwal Brahmins. Just look at the Kadim system they invented. We are talking about a barren desert where summer temperatures regularly hit 50 degrees Celsius, and rain is basically a myth. Yet, they figured out how to use the natural slopes of the hills to harvest rainwater. They designed it so the water would seep deep into the earth, literally turning useless desert sand into ultra-fertile soil. Using this astonishing hydraulic engineering, they successfully grew 2 crops a year, right in the middle of the unforgiving Thar Desert. I mean, that is the real magic of Kuldhara.
So, what should you really take away from this explainer? As this final quote perfectly sums it up, the true story of Kuldhara isn't about spirits roaming in the night. It's a profound, very real tale of human struggle against a tyrannical ruler and a rapidly changing climate. It is a testament to the brilliant science of a civilization that literally made the desert bloom and their incredible resilience when they were forced to leave everything they knew behind to start over. The next time you hear a spooky story, take a step back and ask yourself, what incredible historical truth might be hiding just beneath the surface of the myth? Thank you so much for joining me to uncover the real Kuldhara today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you on the next one.